Oh, 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 oh. Oh. Almost fell off. Jesus, it's slippy. Well, that was scary, wasn't it? Here is why I won't be falling off this winter. So this is going to be a guide to staying upright on the bike this winter. And it might sound a bit dramatic saying, you know, I'm never, or a bit too cocky, saying I'm never gonna fall off. Well, I think this guide, so if I am gonna implement all of these things, then you can, and therefore you minimize the risk of falling off. So these are just things, you know, that I've picked up over, you know, years and thousands of kilometers of riding, and you know, keeps me safe. So I see, you know, a lot of people, you know, they're complaining about how dangerous it is now. So it's in the northern hemisphere now. It's winter, and especially here in the UK, the roads are pretty dangerous. And I'm not just talking about other users of the road, cars and whatnot. I'm talking about the conditions of the road. So I'm here on, I think, a fairly good example of, you know, the dangers you have to look out for when you're riding. So as I say, it might sound a bit cocky, but you know, I see the way that people, you know, cycle, and I see, you know, firsthand people who've fallen off because of, you know, they don't, you know, particularly know how to ride, technique and whatnot. So if you find this, you know, information helpful, and you know, it helps you get through the winter without falling off and breaking a bike or breaking a hip or shoulder, then, you know, give it a like and a subscribe, and you know, we'll make cycling more fun, because that's what it's about, isn't it? So as you can see here, just off on the edge of the road, for example, I mean, this is quite a quiet road, and you know, in the UK there are some really beautiful roads out there. You know, it's not just in the rest of Europe. There are some nice, quiet, fairly quiet roads. So as you can see, the road is damp in parts here, and then dry in other bits. So especially in the UK at this time of year, so it's now December, there's this, because it's quite humid in the UK, and it can be strangely warm as well. Quite often, even if it hasn't rained in the morning or overnight, the road becomes like damp, and it just doesn't, you can't trust that it's going to just be dry or just be wet. So as you can see, there's like a damp patch. You know, today it's dried off quite well, but you might be coming down, you know, around the corner, and then you hit, you know, a wet or a damp patch, and you know, you get that feeling, you're suddenly like scared. And so yeah, in here in the UK, you know, at this time of year, I never have the mindset that I'm racing. So I might maybe introduce, you know, some intervals or whatnot. Well, that's for another video. But in, you know, December, January, you know, at least the end of November, December, January, February, maybe right at the beginning of March, I try to get out the mindset that maybe, you know, I'm racing, you know, around the lanes, and I'm racing myself or other people. You know, even already, you know, just this week in the training, you know, I've been overtaken by, you know, someone's caught up to me and they've used me as a pacemaker, and then, you know, down some little descent, they suddenly, you know, decide that they're gonna show me how it's done and shoot off down the corner. And you know, if a car pulls out, especially, you know, as it's something like this where it's just still damp all day, you can't stop. So as you can see, you know, I'm on a rim brake bike still, almost 2025, and I'm still on a rim brake bike. So yeah, as I say, the roads, when it's still damp and it just stays damp all day, I would say it's slippier than ice. And you might say that's a bizarre thing to say. Well, at least if it's icy, you know what you're dealing with. So if you decide to go out and you know that it's going to be ice, on certain patches of road, you know that there's just going to be no grip, and you change the way your riding style is for that. But when you're going along and you come to a corner and you don't know how much grip it's going to be, then, well, how do I deal with situations where I'm unsure about how much grip I have? Well, firstly, as I've said, if it's not the spring, summer, early autumn, I'm not racing. I'm not going to race it. So I always brake. And it might seem like just a strange thing to say, but braking technique is important. So as I say, I have a rim brake bike, and a lot of people, they talk about the benefits of using a disc brake bike and whatnot. So just to put that into context about the benefits of disc brake bike. So the only benefits you're getting from that is, firstly, you need to know the proper technique of braking. It's not just pull the lever and hope. So to get the benefits from a disc brake bike, you need to have wider tyres, fatter tyres. So I have at the moment a pair of 25mm tyres on, and they measure up at about 25mm. And with this bike, yeah, I can fit maybe, I think, at least 28mm tyres on, but I'm fine with 25. The reason for that is because disc brakes are more powerful. Yes, disc brakes are more powerful than rim brake. However, there's always benefits, negatives. So just as I say, this week, today it's a bit drier. A lot more of the road is dry because the wind's picked up. But just yesterday or the day before, my back wheel was locking up. So you might, wonder what does that mean, locking up? Well, you've probably done it before and not even realised. So coming up to a junction, have to slow down for, or even go around bends, my back wheel will go like that. It'll lock up. So I'm using both brakes, and then I'm using front rear coming up to a junction, let's say, slowing down, and my back wheel will start locking up. So I'm locking up my rim brake bike. So you have to take into consideration, if you don't want the same thing to happen on a disc brake bike, where supposedly the braking force is more powerful, so you're able to lock up the wheels easier, then you need to use it on a much wider tyre in order to try and stop that. So really, on a road bike, traditionally we've had 25mm tyres, or 23, or even narrower. You're really going to need to have a 32mm tyre, or you're getting on for like mountain bike style cyclocross tyres, to make up for the fact that you are going to be able to lock up the rear wheel much easier when the road's slippier. So I counteract that by moving my weight over the back of the saddle to just distribute the weight a bit more. But yeah, so you need to keep that into consideration. A rim brake bike, yeah, although it's less powerful, it does, and you might say that's not true, but it does modulate easier. And when I say modulate, I mean if I'm coming into a corner, so if I'm coming down, so in the UK I'd be on the left side, so if I'm coming in and before I reach the apex of the corner, I'm scrubbing off the speed, and in my personal opinion, I find that I'm able to, and I suppose years of experience as well with using rim brakes, I'm able to know how much I can pull on the lever before my brakes start, in theory, locking up. But I found, and you might find as well, you don't necessarily always know with a disc brake bike when the brake is going to start grabbing and slowing you down. Whereas when you're pulling on a rim brake and using rim brakes, as you're pulling on the brake and applying more force, you know when you're going to start slowing down. Whereas with a disc brake bike, as you're starting to pull on the lever and more force is being applied to the disc, you don't always know when the disc is going to lock up, or a lot of forces, or when the wheel will start to decelerate more. And what I mean by that is, so if I'm moving this way and I'm applying the brake and I'm slowing it down, I know when I'm going to lock it up with a rim brake. I know that just from experience. Whereas if I'm on a disc brake bike, am I going to lock up? I mean, I don't know when that point is. It's much more difficult to guess or know. And yeah, this might sound like I'm bashing disc brakes. Well, I sort of am, but they do work, and they're amazing on a mountain bike. I started myself personally on a mountain bike, and they're brilliant on that. It's really fun. But on the road, especially on narrower tires, if you are doing road riding, then I think it's a bit dangerous. And I would recommend, if you want to get a winter bike or whatever, stick to rim brakes, because I think they're safer if you're on the narrow tires and you're doing that road riding. So as I was saying, braking technique. So, again, in the UK or countries that drive on the correct side of the road, so same as a motorbike. So the right hand will be the front brake, so that's where the most power is coming from, and the left hand will be the rear brake. So when you're coming into the corner, it's the same for the wet and dry. Before you start going into the corner and starting to lean into the corner, that's when you want to take the most amount of speed off. So as I say, if I'm coming down here and I say just where I am, I know this bend isn't particularly, it's not particularly tight, but if I was coming down here, I would already be on the brakes, 100 yards up there at least, already starting to take the speed off, and I'd be using a lot of my front brake just initially to get the speed down the most. Now if you're coming into the corner and you think you've left a little bit too much speed on, one of the most important things in the winter riding, or all riding really, but especially in the winter, is don't panic. So I've done some road racing, quite a lot of road racing in the past, and when you're riding in a bunch and you're going down a descent or whatever, the amount of times I've said to the riders around me, when I can tell that when someone's getting nervous, their shoulders come up and they're breathing, and you can tell people are getting nervous, I just say to them, just relax, please, just relax. And they might find that annoying or irritating, but just a reminder just to relax. So don't start grabbing the brakes hard, because you'll lock your wheels up. So if you do have some speed still left into the corner, what you want to get, the only thing you really have left is the rear brake. Now, as you probably know, the rear brake is the one that you can easily, start to lock up, and that's just the physics of that. If you're in a straight line, you can counteract the rear wheel locking up by moving your weight back over the saddle to try and counteract that lockup. But if you're already in the corner and you're going around the corner, you're going to want to just, I say, don't panic, just start skimming the rear brake. So just gently start to apply some pressure. Now, a lot of people, they seem to say, well, I can have disc brakes and I can brake later. It allows me to brake later. This is not a good mindset to be in. You know, this will lead to injury. That will lead to you falling off. So I'd always say, you know, you might not like it because it doesn't feel professional. You know, the pros don't do it. You know, if you're racing, the whole point is keeping your speed up. You know, your average speed up, so that, you know, if you're going through corners or whatever, you can keep that average speed always up, so you don't have to brake hard and then accelerate hard. You can just keep your speed going through and you won't get dropped from the race. But that's racing. But if you're out and you want to stay safe, you should be braking earlier, you know, twice, 3 times as early. You know, if it was in the summer, yeah, you can afford to do that, but in the winter, that's not a good mindset. Now, as I say, another thing that people overlook, especially when they're going through quite tight corners, you know, with still quite a lot of speed. So I've got a little clip, I think I might just put it in. You know, I made this mistake fairly recently, actually, in the autumn. So I was coming down a hill and it was quite a tight right-hander, and it was like this. There was sort of leaves, you know, started coming down, and it was still wet in this shaded bit of the road. And I started pedaling, and I didn't strike the pedal on the floor. So that's one thing you can do, is if your bike is leaning over like this and you start to pedal like that and it strikes the ground, so I'll just show you. So if your bike's leant over like that and you pedal, it'll kick the back wheel up like that. And you know, you might have seen it in the pros when they have to pedal as soon as possible out of a corner, and their pedal comes round and it strikes the floor like that. You see how it's lifting the rear wheel off the ground? So that's one thing you have to look out for. But this corner wasn't actually that tight, or tight enough that I was leaning over that my pedal would strike. I just started pedaling a bit too early, and it made the rear wheel slide for a moment, and I had to readjust my line. So I was, you know, if I was coming down here, you know, sort of about the apex of the corner, I started pedaling again, and it would have made me come, in order to keep the bike upright, I had to, so I was going like this way, and in order to, you know, make the corner, I had to straighten the bike upright. So instead of it being leaned over, I had to straighten it up, slow, brake, because I say, if you're in the bend, you cannot use the front brake. You can't use the front brake, otherwise you'll lose the front wheel. And so if you're coming in to a corner, so if I'm going that way and then my bike's going like this, so if I've got my rear brake and my front brake and I'm already in the corner like this, you cannot pull on that, especially if it's slippy. You know, if you pull on that, you're gonna go like this, and depending on how fast, you know, you're going, you're gonna fall on your shoulder and maybe break your shoulder. So the only way, really, you know, if you've come into the bend a little bit too fast, you can just apply a little bit of the rear brake. So if you're in that situation where you feel like you're starting to slip, depending on how much road you have, if you're leaning in, you need to straighten the bike up, and you need to remember, again, not to panic. So when you're cornering or going around a bend, whenever it is, you need to be looking where you want to go. So if I want to go over there, I need to look and my bike will follow. But if I, panic and the wheels start to lock up and I'm starting to slide, you need to then really, you're not going to be able to make the apex and make the corner. You need to then look where you're headed next. So if you start to brake and you need to use the front brake, you'll have to, so if I'm going that way, you'll need to straighten the bike up more, and then you can apply the front brake. So you can't turn and brake because your front wheel will slide out. So once you panicked and you need to straighten up the bike, that's when you apply the force of both brakes together, and hopefully you'll have enough room and you might slow down, and then you can start making your turn. But if you need to straighten the bike up and just use the runway that you've got in order not to fall on your shoulder and break anything. I have to say that one of the most important things is don't panic, okay? Try not to panic. Okay. So I think another thing that people, when they're out riding, riding in a group versus riding solo. I know a lot of people struggle for motivation in the winter. I like to ride with other people, but the risks of riding in a group, I don't know if I have to say it, but it will increase the chance of crashes. So you have to weigh up benefits, negatives. If I ride in a group, it's good for motivation, I get the winter miles in, but what's other people's bike handling like? Are they good? Do they know how to ride a bike? Or if you're riding by yourself, you can also see where you're going. So that's another thing, is about line choice. Okay, so if you're wanting, so if I'm going around the left hand bend or right hand bend like that, so obviously you have to stay safe within the rule, the rules of the road. So you want to try and open up the line of the bend as much. So if I'm coming again down here and around and I'm on the left hand side, within, I'm not going to be dangerous, but I'll come more to the right, and that opens up the bend for me. So you might be wondering, what do I mean by opens up the corner? Well, when I say it opens up the corner, it essentially means that the angle that you have to take is less dangerous. So if I'm coming in like this and I'm going like that, all the way from the left, I go around the bend and I'm going back to the left. If you come more, before you reach the apex of the corner, you come more to the right of the road, obviously not all the way because you don't want to hit oncoming traffic, but if you move yourself just a few more feet to the right before you've hit the apex of the corner, it just means that your bike isn't leaned over quite as much. And also quite often, if you move your bike over to the right more, you can see through more of the corner as well. And this is one of the things I see so often when especially in road races, and it's a bit scary thinking back, but so when you're riding along, you shouldn't be riding like this. So like your eyes shouldn't just be basically a centimetre in front of your front wheel. So if I'm riding like this, okay, and you can see my eyes, I'm like riding like that. When I'm riding along, I should be looking ahead of me, seeing what's coming. I shouldn't be riding like this, I should be riding like this. And I'm scanning up and down the road to see what's coming. And I see it so often. And it's something you really have to practice. And it might seem a bit disconcerting at first, thinking, well, when you walk, you're kind of looking directly down, aren't you? But you need to keep your head up and look where you're going. And that'll give you, well, more time. Isn't that what we all want in life, is more time? Well, more time, more life, you'll be safer. And that gives you more time to react, gives you a longer braking distance, and therefore less likely to crash and break everywhere in your body. So another thing that I see is, rains a lot now, in the winter. Potholes, they can fill up with water, or the roads are getting broken up as well, and it's not just going to be a beautiful smooth road like it would be if you went off to a winter training camp. So you need to be able to have, I think, at least the basic skills in order to avoid, it's been very windy and stormy, so little branches fall off, twigs and whatnot. So you definitely need to learn, and really you should have the proper technique of, the bunny hop, where it's front and back and like this, it's like a hop. But that just takes some practice, and it's technique you have to really put time in. But if you can at least do the as I call it, the lazy bunny hop, where you're basically you're going down a hill, maybe see a pothole or a twig, and you have to jump the bike. So essentially that's, you're pulling off with your hands, and if you have cleats, your shoe is connected to your pedal, you can pull your feet up at the same time, and your bike will go like that in the air, and you'll avoid at least most things, twigs or potholes or whatnot. But really it should be the proper bunny hop, where the technique is, it's all in the hands and in the arms. So you pull up, and then to get the back wheel to kick up, you have to push the front away from you, so it's like that, and that will kick the back wheel up, but that'll be for another video. Yeah, so I think I've given it some helpful information there. So I wanted to do some training abroad and avoid the bad weather, but that opportunity hasn't really happened. So I'll be training in the UK this winter and getting in a lot of miles. So if I do fall out, which I don't think I will, as I say, don't race it, brake properly, and remember all these things, and yeah. So I'm on 25mm tires and about 90 psi. I basically keep it at about 90, so I weigh about 66 kilos at the moment, so I'm on about 90 psi front and back, and I say it's I think a lot more about technique will let you down rather than the equipment. And especially if you know beforehand about what will happen, disc brake versus rim brake, you're informed about the effects that it has on the physics of how that works. So I just like to use rim brake because I know it's reliable. I know when my wheels are going to lock up. I know how much, obviously it depends on your brake cable and how much it's tuned up, but I can feel how much I'm pulling on the wheels before they start to lock up and then slide. So yeah, please forgive, I should have said, please forgive the state of the bike. It will be cleaned. Just quickly came out and made this video, and so yeah, you need to keep your bike clean during the winter, because then I just fall apart and then you'll crash like that. So yeah, keep the bike clean, and if you're using rim brakes, clean the rims, because then it doesn't wear the rims away. Again, it doesn't affect the feeling of the braking, of course. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video and you learned something new, or maybe you knew all this, but if you think I missed something, then put it in the comments, and yeah, we can learn together, exchange all of our information. Yeah, if you've maybe fallen off, just put it in the comments. Say, what was it, something that I haven't mentioned, or I mean, the last time I fell off, that wasn't my fault. Whereas probably, I don't know, 30,000 kilometers ago, in terms of actual miles ridden, or more than that, I think. I say it's just putting all these techniques together, and also just, I think, the mindset. Are you concentrating? Are you thinking about other things? So I quite often listen to music, when I'm riding, or if I'm listening to a podcast, or if I'm learning a language or whatever. You have to sometimes, you can zone out when you're going along, but then if you get to a technical section of road, you have to zone back in to the riding and concentrate. I've been, sort of almost done that, where I've sort of been listening to my music so much that I've kind of not really been aware of the road conditions coming up, and have to tune back in and really concentrate on what I'm doing, because otherwise, I might just fall off. And that's stupid, isn't it? Yeah. So I think another thing as well is, cars, they might not realise, stopping distances. So I'd always give more space. If I'm in a line of traffic, I would always give more space to the car in front of me, especially if it's a twisty road. They might overtake you because they're going faster than you. But on a descent, really, a bike's going to be as fast, and if they suddenly stop, or there's traffic, or someone's going to pull out, you need to give yourself more room to the back of the car, because your braking distance, if you panic and pull on the brakes, your wheels are going to lock up, and again, you're going to slide. So you need to give yourself more time. It's always about time. Let your brain think, and hand-eye coordination and all that. So yeah, there's more videos on the channel. I like to try and make these videos, unscripted, just make them genuine, and so you can see, it just comes from, what I've learned, and I'm not just regurgitating stuff I read online that I've not tested, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. Because we see that a lot, don't we? And it gets people hurt, and people suffer the consequences. So as I say, action, consequence. So don't suffer the consequences of your actions, and think about the consequences of your actions. Okay? So see you in the next one. Hope you enjoyed, and thank you for your time.